It's really an honor and privilege to, for the first time ever, have a public share around the OneNation platform. This is a topic that inevitably comes up very soon in any conversation. I think mostly because we've been trained to ask certain questions. So it's like, what's your position on, or what's the platform about, you know? So in some ways we have to meet that like way that people have been trained to relate to politics. And at the same time, we need to start to be able to have very clear answers to that. And so this presentation is going to be a start of a much longer conversation on how we speak about the OneNation platform and how we begin to understand and embody it, and how we use the genetics that I'm going to be sharing today to help us to further ground and crystallize this all the way into policy. Okay, so this is the beginning of a conversation.
Short answer position statements are inherently divisive. We see that what America needs more than another campaign promise is an increased quality of conversation. The issues we see polarize America represent deep ideological differences, and we respect the care, values, and good intentions held on both sides of any topic. We also do not see any topics that are irreconcilable if first approached with an earnest attitude to seek common ground. On the contrary, we posit that mature conversations on each of these traditionally polarized topics will not only generate productive results, but will dynamically bring Americans together in greater love, appreciation, creativity, and betterment.
So let's start off by just looking at this general orientation. Okay, at the highest level, how do we think about what a OneNation policy platform should be? First and foremost, our issues are more complex intelligence we are applying to them. What that means is that issues that we have in America, the quality of the conversation, as Forrest mentioned earlier, the quality of the intelligence we're applying to it is inferior to the magnitude and complexity of the challenges we face. So we can just, if you agree with that, if that resonates with you, then we can take it as a given, as a premise, that there's no way that the existing intelligence of politics will be able to meet the needs of our time. So we either give up and collapse and say game over and sedate, or we demand that we raise the intelligence of how we apply our own perspective and genius and intellect to the political conversation. So improving our policy discourse, principles, and process is our platform. Do you get that? It's improving the sophistication of how we think about politics that is our platform. And some of this breaks down into definitive things to wrap our mind into. Number one, common ground is our point. That's where we start the conversation. Number two, parallax is our process. What is parallax? Parallax is the ability to perceive three-dimensionality because you look at something from two different perspectives. And so if we stare at one policy issue from the same perspective our whole life that we were raised in and taught in and inculcated in, we're just continuing to see one dimension of the issue. And as we mature in our sophistication and we can start to be able to look at the same issue from multiple perspectives, then it comes alive into 3D. We can see it in a way that we never saw it before. So parallax, the ability to take multiple perspectives on any given topic, that's our process. Two people looking at the same shape. One person looking over here sees a circle. They're certain it's a circle. The person over here looks at it, they see a rectangle. Certain it's a rectangle. You look at it from multiple perspectives, you find a cylinder. Okay? And that's what we need to do with every single topic and issue. Now, I understand you might be thinking, yeah, but how many people are ready for that? I don't know. But let's find out. Because it might be more tens of millions than we would imagine, because there's not a narrative in our current media talking. Don't hear about it. So we don't know how many Americans are ready to increase the sophistication of how we talk about politics. Experiments are how we know. Do we know because our ideology said so? Do we know because somebody said so? Do we know because this was my idea and my ego says so? We know that something that we're doing is effective. Well, we run an experiment, right? So we start with our common ground, look at it from multiple perspectives, and then we come up with a basic experiment that helps us to better understand how a solution can create impact, what the the accidental or inadvertent that might be learned from that, and we can scale up our policies with increased confidence and learning that experimentation gives us. This is how biology works. Biology is running experiments, and it's learning, it's upgrading, no dictates. And so we need to mirror biology. We need to apply mimicry into how we run experiments, learn, and scale things. So you are invited to take a brave, bold step off the ideological divide and into something new. You are invited. Are you ready? If someone's labeled you before as liberal or conservative or progressive or whatever, and this defined you, are you ready to let that definition melt so you can step off that ideological divide that's kept us separate? Melt those walls and step into something new. A brave new way. I love this image, also created by Joe Muscatello. So we've got AV, we've got our beautiful song, anthem that he wrote, and he's also our graphic designer. And this starts to tell a story, and I hope that you can start to feel the story that this image, this icon, is telling. This brave new way, this policy platform, is a platform of discovering how to do win-win. How to talk in a way that's committed to everybody's perspective being heard and integrated. We don't really know how to do that very well. And then beyond that, how to turn that into actual policy. How to convert that into laws and systems and budget allocations and tax law that also represents that quality of intelligence. Is that going to be a little tricky? Yes. Is it doable? Absolutely. 1,000 times easier than putting somebody on the moon, and we've done that. Some people debate that. But we've definitely put rockets in space, and that's pretty crazy. And the creativity required to put a rocket in space is a fraction of the creativity that we're going to need to be able to figure out how to do this with policy. But there's a boldness and a courage that we need to be willing to apply that creativity. So I love to talk about these 4 American virtues to begin to tell a new narrative, a new story of what is this whole ideological divide thing that they've been trying to cram down our throats. And the narrative that I want to bring forward today, and one that I invite you to hold and proliferate, is that there's these 4 treasured virtues. And there's been these 4 different tribes in America that have held the sacred responsibility for maintaining these virtues. And in some times, they've been a little bit misguided and have even started to fight each other in defense of those virtues because of how much they care about the critical virtue they have been entrusted with. And we see that those folks that have been represented by the Libertarian Party in the past are a stand for freedom. They want to be free. They want to be sovereign. They want government to do as little as necessary to impinge upon their freedom day to day, moment to moment. It's a virtue that this nation was founded upon. So I want to thank all those carriers that have been holding that down for freedom. Thank you. Next, we have this whole zone. And I like to refer to it as personal responsibility, or productivity, or generativeness, or even creative capacity, or ingenuity, right? This zone has held that sacred virtue, and everything that's come down the pipeline that they feel is a handout or somehow undermines personal responsibility or somehow undermines a person's ability to be productive and have an environment that demands their productivity to come forward, they fought for that. They fought against that. And so I thank those holders of this virtue. Next, we have over here dignity, equality. Just standing for the fact that, hey, let's make sure that everybody's taken into consideration, even the least among us, even the afflicted. Let's make sure that the dignity's there. Let's make sure that we all pony up a little bit to support our brothers and sisters who need it. Because that could be you too. That's the stand they've held. That's the virtue they've protected, and thank you for that. And sometimes we need a little bit of resource available to be able to create a solution for somebody who needs it, to create a program, policy that can help a person to see their own dignity because we saw it too. And over here, we've got stewardship, right? Stewardship of the commons, stewardship of our land, of our air, of our water, of our planet, of our children, and our children's futures, and our posterity. And so I want to thank all those that have held this American virtue. And now is the time for those virtue keepers to bring their pieces together. And the OneNation Policy Platform is a stand that every policy we are working with or backing or generating or innovating takes fully into consideration each of these four virtues so that personal freedom, personal responsibility and productivity, dignity and equality, and stewardship are all factored in. We have parallax on the process of any given topic, and we create fundamentally superior answers that have been offered to us thus far. This is the quality of intelligence that will be able to meet the complexity of the challenges of our day. This is the process that will be able to invite responsible and mature leaders and citizens of this country who have historically found themselves here as virtue keepers to realize that it's time for a new way, a brave new way. And ultimately, how this all hits is exactly what Forrest mentioned earlier. At the level of the conversation. If you know a little bit about etymology, verse is to turn. And con is together. A conversation is to turn together, to do that parallax process together, to hear here and hear here and listen to here and listen to here and turn and say, oh, wow, I never thought of that before. Oh, I never looked at it this way before. Oh, when you say it that way, it gives me a new idea. And so if we can learn to turn together, to have a conversation, right, then we'll be able to meet the challenges of our day and ground that all the way 3D into policy, into how our cities function, how our states function, and how our nation functions. And from this place, we get to model something very special to the world, because I believe that each of you, I won't even say it that way. Some of you in this room may be proud to be an American. Some of you in this room may be ashamed. Many of you are probably both. And this right here is an opportunity for us to reclaim our pride, that righteous pride, that sacred pride, that I'm going to stand a little bit taller and feel good about myself pride, because our nation is modeling something to the world that's medicine that everybody needs. So I mentioned that common ground is our starting point. So I'm going to mention 3 specific ways that we help to start at common ground. I want to thank Joe Muscatello for this beautiful design. E pluribus unum, Latin, right from the roots of this nation. Out of many, one. Do you guys see what's happening? This is the rebirth. We're going back to the principles, to the sayings, to the words that were present 300 years ago. And we're reclaiming them and rebirthing them together. So the first principle of common ground as our starting point is to make sure that we start every conversation with our shared humanity. Before we get into issues and topics, we go into our shared humanity. Protecting our children's futures. Shared. Protecting our land and water. Soothing the fear in our world. Being loving neighbors. Becoming a beacon of fairness, opportunity, and goodness. We start here. We talk about these things. We unpack these things. We focus. We can all talk about how much we love our children without ever revealing where we've come from historically on that ideological divide. So let's start talking about how much we love our children. Let's start by talking about how much we love going on a hike through the forest. Let's start talking about how, in fact, we're seeing that there's fear in the world, and that's getting a little bit scary because it seems like it's increasing. Let's start the conversation there and making wise decisions. Okay. So our shared pains, this is where we go second, because what the current narrative of American politics doesn't want to illuminate is that we are sharing grievously in the same pains, regardless of where we've been plotted on this historic ideological divide. We need to know that. We need to reveal that. We need to use that as a major lever towards bringing us together. What are some examples of how we have these conversations? We are all threatened, our personal privacy and our civil rights. As government encroaches in power, all of us, regardless of our political affiliation, are dealing with this. We are all experiencing medical error. We have 5,000 deaths a week in America, right? We had 3,000 fatalities in 9/11, just to put it into perspective. We have 5,000 a week through medical error. This is a shared pain that needs to be central in our conversation. We have chronic disease and mental health epidemics that are affecting all of us. There's a deteriorating intellectual capacity of American children based upon the current educational system. It's affecting all of us equally. We stand at risk of epidemics and natural disasters. And there's various levels of preparedness and readiness for these things. And this jeopardizes us essentially equally. Our water quality, our soil quality, our food, and our air are compromised. I'm going to let each of you define what compromise means to you. But I know that you can touch what this means. And it's compromised for all of us. There are unchecked governmental powers that are taking the government beyond the bounds of the Constitution, which is a little bit scary because it means that we're not really sure exactly what could happen anytime, and the government isn't being fully held to the conditions and the parameters that were set forth in the Constitution. This is impacting all of us and could impact all of us, and frankly, should concern us all gravely. There's a growing governmental debt burden, And this burden threatens the sovereignty and the freedom and the prosperity of our children. And it impacts all of us. And you may be realizing that we have robotics and artificial intelligence coming online, and it's fundamentally going to change our entire reality. And this is going to change all of our lives. And the list goes on and on and on. People say, how could you possibly help people come together? They're so divided. They're so divided because we start political conversations with the most polarizing topics, because those are the topics that the media has taught us to talk about, that have been strategically designed to polarize us so that we stay separate and weak. This is where we start the conversation. And this is where we begin to come together. And I've got the decreased dignity of our elders in dying as another shared pain for all of us. Let's just give that a moment. Addiction. And a society that seems to have made addiction a natural output. Who's been affected by this in some way? Your loved ones, yourselves, right? Shared pain. We need to take it head on. Speak about it from the mountaintops. So let's take a moment to take a peek at America to actually see, despite the standard narrative, where America really is at from a ideological perspective. This is an amazing report produced by the Hidden Tribes, which is an organization that named themselves after they did this research. And this is what this research shows, is that we have about 25% of America over here on this wing, and we have another 8% over there on what they call that wing. But it's mostly this 8% and this 6% here that are driving the public political narrative. Okay? This narrative is what we need to look at head on, because it's been what's been used to control us. You have 84% inside of those that are controlling this narrative that don't align with the narrative, but haven't been given another narrative to align to. So there's just nothing to do but be complacent or fall into one of these two offered narratives of what's actually going on here. They call this the exhausted majority. And can you feel that? Did they nail that name? They nailed it. And what you're looking at right here in this exhausted majority is about 65% of America. We're talking about 200 million people are exhausted. So we ask the question of, oh yeah, there's no way that you can get past these insurmountable hurdles. We've never actually engaged 65% of Americans into the political process. They've tried to go here and to go here. They've seen failure. They've become cynical. And now is an opportunity to meet them and their needs, right? 26% are totally disengaged. We can win the 2020 presidential election with just that 26%. We don't have to fight ideological warfare. We just need to activate those who haven't yet been inspired to play the political process, because this is the only thing that they've been offered. Americans don't want to fight. Double-clicking further into this study, we see that of the exhausted majority and of the wings, 65% and 51% respectively want the people that they agree with to be willing to listen to others and compromise, right? This green is those that want to be fighting for their ideological entrenchment. But if you do the math here, this is 66% of America that's saying, what I want from my political leader, who I am aligned with ideologically, is to listen to other people of different perspectives. This is what's actually true in Americans' perspectives. They just don't have the opportunity to exercise this desire in the existing context. We have been trained to be divided by issues. If we look at this study, we look at just a handful of issues. There's so many more. The way that they've been framed splits America right down the center with uncanny precision. It forces a divide. Boom, boom. That one. That one. And so we think, because of how these have been framed and how the stats come up, that how could we ever get along? Civil war must be imminent. This is just a matter of an inferior perspective, not a fundamental division that will preclude our ability to co-create a thriving future. So we start with looking at our shared humanity. We then move into our shared pain. And the third thing in creating this common ground is we look at our shared desires. What can we agree on that we want beyond what we don't want? How can we use that shared aspiration to bring us into creativity and generativeness together? So I'm going to go through a number of topics. And this is just, like I said, a first pass on how, there's no formal statements here. It's just a pass on how to start thinking about identifying the shared desires that live on that which we have previously considered to be fundamentally polarizing topics. Would we be happier if we did a better job of using the healing properties of nature to help Americans live better? Yes? Would you? Would we be happier if our police were better able to protect the safety, freedom, and rights of Americans? Would we? Would we be happier if we loved each other more? Would we be happier if we all felt safer? Would we be happier if we were healthier? Would we be happier if we were all more resilient? Would we be happier if those who broke laws became productive members of society? Would we be happier with fewer unplanned pregnancies? Would we be happier if we increased the respect we have for women as our mothers, wives, sisters, colleagues, and leaders? I'm not saying 100% of America has to agree to this. I'm saying, can we use this to find out who's ready for something beyond what they've been offered? Would we be happier if we had better processes to ensure visitors to America are fairly dealt with and deal fairly while in America? Would we be happier if we had fewer needs from government? Would we be happier if everyone knew their freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of their individual pursuit of happiness was protected? Would we be happier if our militaries performed their duties more efficiently so we could make more investments in our children? Would we be happier if American animals were healthier? Would we be happier if our society empowered our inflicted citizens to rise in capacity, creativity, and personal responsibility? Are there things we can change that would leave us feeling more proud to be American? Last couple here. Would we be happier if we knew our children will inherit a beautiful world? Would we be happier if we could establish common ground and work together to improve our society? Would we be happier if every American enjoyed protected freedom, remember, increased productivity, equal dignity, and a stronger sense of stewardship of our land, people, and future? The pursuit of happiness was this thing that was present when this country was founded. But when's the last time you heard that held honorably by the political leaders of this place? A stand for the pursuit of happiness. Is it possible that we could rebirth that original genetic, indigenous to this place as a mechanism to heal and unite our nation? What can you count on with the OneNation platform? You can count on the fact that we are going to create policy that integrates the important thinking on all sides of an issue and brings us into a happier future. And considering the fact that the primary topics that have driven political narrative aren't the ones that impact us the most, you can count on the fact that we are going to help you discover what scares you the most, what pains you the most, what's keeping you back the most, and what you want the most, and make those things the political issues of our time that we work together to explore and solve. Parallax and experimentation as we close this presentation. We start by establishing common ground aspirations. We integrate diverse perspectives, moving us closer to being omni-considerate, meaning we're taking as much into consideration as we possibly can on any topic. Creating solutions that meet diverse interests, meaning we're vectoring towards, we're approaching win-win as best as we can. Conducting small-scale experiments based upon this thought process so we can ground that and learn. Analyzing our experiments transparently and revealing what's working and what's not working and where we had a good idea and where we didn't have a good idea and where there was an unintended consequence in our policy that we learned in a small-scale experiment that we can then upgrade and iterate the policy to address. Learn and iterate and scale what's working. So this is the OneNation political platform. And the platform is a process, not an ideology. And what we need right now is a process that can help to integrate, synthesize, alchemize, and transform the perspectives ideologically that we've had, use them for exactly what they have been to create tension that supports our creative process and drive this process for every topic, every issue. This is a Herculean effort. This is a Manhattan Project scale initiative. This is an all hands on deck. I'm not saying this is something we do overnight, but this is something worthy of taking on. And it's something that we arguably must take on. What you can count on this OneNation platform is that we are going to create a system capable of bringing Americans together in creativity and producing policy that solves the pressing challenges of our day and takes us into a thriving future together. Are you ready? Are you ready to create a new culture of politics that selects for maturity, care, wisdom, and win-win decision-making? Are you ready? And how many millions of Americans are ready to? We won't know for sure until we raise the flag and see who comes out into the streets saying, hallelujah, now's the time. The One Nation political platform is committed to rebirthing civics in America. Thank you.